Here, until Wednesday, save up to 20% on American Standard toilets and save 20% on Moen faucets. Sale ends Wednesday at Home Hardware and Building Centers. Here's how.
Hey, Canada, we're celebrating turning weekdays into deal days at Montana's. Like our half-price wings on Monday, $5 tacos on Tuesdays, and all-you-can-eat rib Wednesdays. So come on in for good times, good company, and even better barbecue. Montana's, the grill is calling.
Ah, that Tropicana feeling. It's the feeling of natural sun-ripened oranges. The feeling of hip shakes and 100% pure squeeze goodness. That Tropicana feeling.
Tomorrow on Your Morning, if you're self-employed or a gig worker, what you need to know before you file your taxes this year. Start your morning in the know Tuesday on CTV.
If you love hit music, you'll love Virgin Radio. Virgin Radio is your #1 hit music station. Download the free iHeartRadio app and listen to Virgin Radio everywhere.
The RCMP has begun an investigation into reports of information leaks associated with recent media reports. In a statement, the force says the investigation is not focused on any single security agency.
She always wanted to travel. She loved to travel. So she was really excited to be there. It was for her birthday.
A Canadian man is in custody in Mexico after a BC woman is found dead at a resort south of Cancun, Mexico on Friday. And a Southwest Airlines flight is forced to make an emergency landing in Havana after reportedly experiencing bird strikes shortly after takeoff. Hello and welcome to CTV News Channel. Thanks for joining us. I'm Angie Sath. We are following breaking news out of Ottawa. The RCMP has initiated an investigation into violations of the Security of Information Act associated with recent media reports. Now, the National Communications Service released a statement saying this investigation is not focused on any one security agency. As the RCMP is investigating these incidents, there will be no further comment on this matter at this time. We'll continue to follow developments there. Meantime, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he will not remove the 3 MPs who met with the far-right German politician Christine Anderson. The party has been under fire after a photo was released of 3 Ontario MPs meeting with Anderson, who is a member of the far-right Alternative for Germany party. Poilievre has denied claims. He also spoke with Anderson, despite the German politician claiming the two have talked. When questioned by reporters, Poilievre dodged questions about his connection with Anderson, instead accusing the Prime Minister of racism. Take a listen.
Over half of his adult life dressed up in vile, racist costumes so many times that he cannot remember them all. I mean, you should be asking him, how many times did he dress up in these costumes? How many other times are there that we don't know about? And furthermore, we're also speaking out against the government giving tax dollars to vile, anti-Semitic racists that are spreading hatred across our country at the same time as supposedly the program is supposed to fight racism.
To another story we're also following now. A Canadian man has been detained in Mexico after a BC woman was found dead while on vacation near Cancun. Police say the body of Kiara Agnew of Dawson Creek was discovered in a hotel room with what police describe as possible marks of violence on Friday. One man is in custody. Agnew's family says she was in Mexico to celebrate her birthday with her boyfriend. A GoFundMe page has also been set up to bring her body home to Dawson Creek. So far, it has raised over $20,000. And Kiara's aunt says her family hopes the person responsible for her death will be held accountable.
It's beyond tragic. Everyone's kind of in disbelief, and what we want is justice for Kiara. We want her home. We want everything to come out. We want the truth to come out. We want whoever did this to be held accountable, because it wasn't their choice to make. She wanted to live, and it wasn't fair to have that taken from her.
Kara Agnew's aunt says she was in Mexico for a birthday celebration. The family has set up, as we mentioned, a GoFundMe page to cover the costs of bringing her body back home. We'll continue to follow further developments for you on that story. Turning now to a controversy facing Hockey Quebec. A junior hockey player is filing a human rights complaint against Hockey Quebec after he was subjected to racial slurs during a game and a hearing committee.
We want change, not just to single out a single person. We want change in Hockey Quebec's system, and not even just Hockey Quebec, but all sports.
16-year-old Aiden Chase says he's been called the N-word twice on the ice while playing with the Lac St. Louis League. The player who said the slur was given an 8-game suspension and was later granted a hearing to appeal the decision.
You have to tackle that issue with education, but also with some firm disciplinary action as well. It has to come both ways, and you have that expression that you have the carrot and the stick, and it's basically it.
And Quebec Major Junior Hockey League Commissioner Gilles Couteau resigned on Sunday. He was in the middle of a firestorm after testifying at the Quebec legislature on hockey hazing rituals and initiations. Couteau says it wasn't an easy decision to make, but recent events have caused his family to suffer. The assistant commissioner will now take over until a new commissioner is appointed. Take you live now to the nation's capital. MPs back on Parliament Hill. The issue of election interference expected to be back in the spotlight, and calls continue to grow for the Prime Minister to launch a public inquiry. But those calls, the Prime Minister has so far resisted. Our senior political correspondent for CTV News Channel, Michael Couture, joins me now. So, Mike, good to have you back. There's a lot that sort of unfolded over the course of the morning now into the afternoon. Let's first focus on some of that breaking news that you brought to us last hour.
Yeah, first of all, on those leaks from CSIS that we are hearing that the RCMP will now be investigating. And those are the leaks that have led to some of the reporting from different news outlets about the election interference or allegations of election interference and where they had come from, the intelligence information that has been leaked to different media outlets. And the RCMP putting out this statement, I know you had it earlier, but let's put it up there again so people can see it, Angie, saying that the RCMP has initiated an investigation into violations of the Security of Information Act associated with recent media reports, going on to say this investigation is not focused on any one security agency. As the RCMP is investigating these incidents, there will be no further comment at this time. So again, that is as a result of these media reports that CSIS or somebody at CSIS has been leaking to the media different pieces of intelligence showing Chinese interference in the Canadian election and the attempt to interfere in our election. That comes as a report has said that it was conducted in a fair and free manner, but at the same time that there continue to be these attempts to interfere. And certainly the fact that it is the focus of that Procedure and House Affairs Committee, Angie, and that vote from that committee on a motion to ask for a national public inquiry, something that, as you had mentioned, the Prime Minister continues to rebuff. But those calls likely to get louder. As we know, the House is back in session today, question period at about 2:15, 2:20 Eastern Time. Expect that to be central to the questions going on. We had heard Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives and the leader of the opposition, saying that Katie Telford, the Chief of Staff and somebody who has also been key on the Trudeau campaigns, that she needs to be called before this committee, and expect Jagmeet Singh to sort of echo those calls going forward as he's expected to speak in the next few moments as well.
Indeed, and you mentioned Pierre Poilievre because he was also on the hot seat during his press conferences. Reporters asking him a lot of questions about Christine Anderson, but he didn't have a lot of answers.
No, he didn't. And specifically, what will happen, if anything, to members of his caucus who met with Christine Anderson. This was well publicized. There was an actual, a couple of photos that came out as a result of a meeting that they had had with this far-right politician from Germany, somebody who in the past has espoused views that are, some say, are anti-Semitic and racist. And Pierre Poilievre himself, actually, after this came out, said that her views are racist and vile, and they do not belong in Canada. But on the question of whether or not Leslyn Lewis, Colin Carey, and Dean Allison should have any type of ramifications, any type of punishment from caucus. I believe we have a clip on that exchange with reporters where Pierre Poilievre was fairly unequivocal that he did not want to entertain that question.
Please. Why haven't you imposed any consequences on members of your caucus who met with Christine Anderson, whose views yourself said were vile?
Well, I think right now what I'm more concerned about is the vile and racist views of the Prime Minister, who after over half of, if I could, over half of his adult life, dressed up in vile, racist costumes so many times that he cannot remember them all.
So, of course, Mr. Poilievre there referring to the blackface incident that we had seen that came out during the 2019 campaign, dating back a number of years. Pierre Poilievre continuing to put that front and center in the window. But when asked specifically if he will expel from caucus those 3 members of his caucus, those 3 conservatives, he said unequivocally no. So they will stay in caucus. And it's also worth noting that days after he called the meeting with Christine Anderson and called Christine Anderson's views vile and racist, after that came out, a number of days later, Pierre Poilievre was seen in a Black History Month event with Leslyn Lewis, who is one of the MPs in question. So clearly she has not fallen out of favor with this leadership group.
Indeed. We're going to follow further developments on that as well, which I'm sure could be also top of mind in the House. Mike, thanks a lot for this. A lot going on just for a Monday. Our senior political correspondent for CTV News Channel, Mike LeCouture. Meantime, turning to some other news now, a rally is underway in Halifax in the wake of accusations of discrimination at a public school. CTV's Bruce Frisco is following this story and has the latest from that protest.
This all followed this unusual incident last Wednesday at Park West School. Cultural day there. Students encouraged to wear clothing representing their heritage. And 6 students of Palestinian heritage came in their keffiyehs, which is the black and white checkered cloth representing that country's identity and culture. Now, according to a spokesperson for the group, the kids were singled out and told to remove the garments because they represented the colors of war. They resisted. They were sent home. The parents got involved. They called the school and the school board to complain, but say they didn't get much of a response. As you can see, probably about 24 people here right now, all of them gathering just ahead of the actual formalities of the protest, a lot of them talking to media. You alluded to this a moment ago. We didn't get much of a response from the school board, but on the weekend there was a rare Saturday news release where the top executive there said that they received thousands of emails about this from across the country, and they're deeply sorry for the harm this has caused. We've heard there have been some behind-the-scenes discussions to try to diffuse this situation, but apparently that hasn't gone anywhere, and there is another protest scheduled for tomorrow. We've reached out to both the education minister, we're not sure if she's in her office here today, and the school board, but as of right now, we've yet to hear back from either.
All right, CTV's Bruce Frisco for us. I want to take us back over to Quebec now, and we've been following a pair of controversies in that province as well, in the province's hockey community. First, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League Commissioner, Gilles Courteau, has resigned. He was in the middle of a firestorm after testifying at the Quebec legislature on hockey hazing. Let's bring in CTV's Gervais Bushman now, who is in Montreal for us. Jen, it's great to see you. So there's a lot that's been kind of brewing where you are. Let's first talk about the commissioner and his decision now, abrupt decision to step down.
Oh, absolutely. Gilles Courteau has been the head of the Quebec Junior Major Hockey League here in Quebec for 37 years. And he did testify last month at that National Assembly Commission on Sports. There was a lot of concern at the time, if you recall, about an Ontario court ruling in which there was testimony that was made public regarding the fact that there were these hazing rituals that were involving sexual assaults and torture of players. And at the time when Courteau testified before the National Assembly, he said he was reassuring. He said to politicians who had called him there to testify that there were no such complaints of the scale at which, of the severity that were being seen there in that Ontario court documents. And so he reassured politicians at the time, but then 2 things happened. One of them is that there were reports of a previous testimony that he had given in in the past where he had spoken about serious allegations of hazing. And then there was also a second report that also emerged talking about the fact that in the Ontario court documents, there was actually one of the players was from the Quebec Junior Major Hockey League. And so he said that he had not read that document carefully enough, but there were many calls for him to come back in front of the commission to retestify so that politicians could ask questions. Again, some people saying that he had perjured himself in front of the National Assembly, so he was facing that firestorm. He was scheduled to step down, to retire in May 2024, but now is stepping down, has stepped down immediately, saying that he faced a lot of pressure and that this was impacting his family as well.
And as we're following that story as well, there's sort of another angle to things regarding, racism and discrimination. This is the story of Aiden Chase filing a complaint now against Hockey Quebec, alleging racism, being called the N-word on the ice.
Yeah, 16-year-old midget A player who says that during a game in December, he faced those racial slurs and that there was a brawl that followed those particular slurs on the ice. The player, he says, used those slurs, was at first given an 8-game suspension, but then appealed that decision, and that was reduced to 5 games. But now what Chase and his mother say is that even during those hearings, from Hockey Quebec hearings into the suspensions, there was inappropriate language that was used, and that Hockey Quebec didn't handle the situation properly. They say they're going to the Human Rights Commission because they want to ensure that players like Aiden are protected. They say there have to be changes from things like having more diversity within the ranks of Hockey Quebec. They say the organization is simply not able to handle properly the allegations of racism on and off the ice, and they want those changes to come, and they say this is why they're taking their complaint to the Human Rights Commission.
Indeed, championing, as you say, that campaign, No Racism in Hockey. All right, we're going to follow both these stories for us. Thanks for the update, Jen. CTV's Jen Boschman for us in Montreal. All right, let's take you back over to Ottawa now. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is speaking. Let's take a listen.
People spending over $70 to see a family doctor. While the Conservatives are applauding this because this is right out of their playbook, they want to bring in more for-profit care, no matter how much that harms the system. What is concerning is the major flip-flop of Prime Minister Trudeau, who in the last campaign campaigned against for-profit care, saying it would be bad for Canadians, and we agree. But now he's done a major flip-flop and said that, in fact, for-profit care is good and has applauded the moves of prime minister or premiers that are bringing in for-profit care. So parliamentarians will have a choice today in Parliament. Will they choose to be on the side of a public universal health care or on the side of for-profit care? As Prime Minister, I made my position very clear. I will continue to fight for a universal healthcare system where we invest in our healthcare workers, we retain, respect, and hire and recruit more healthcare workers to deal with the problem. Or, and parliamentarians can choose that option, which is what Canadians want, a healthcare system that's there for them, or they can choose a for-profit option, which will cannibalize healthcare workers in the public from our already overburdened healthcare centers, our emergency rooms, our children's hospitals, and will only make the wait times longer and will make increased costs. People end up paying out of pocket. That's a choice in front of parliamentarians today during the Opposition Day motion vote. Donc, aujourd'hui, les députés ont un choix.
MPs have a choice. What kind of healthcare system we want. Our vision for our healthcare system is one that's public, universal, that's there for you when you need it. Unfortunately, that's not the case now. Now we have people who are pulling out their credit cards instead of their healthcare cards. And that's worrisome. The Conservatives applaud this decision because they want to see more privatization in our healthcare system. But I'm surprised that the Prime Minister made a major U-turn by saying that privatization was a good thing when he campaigned against that. Our position is clear. We have to invest in healthcare workers, in our healthcare system. We have to help provinces more to create a healthcare system that's there for you. And that's the choice before the MPs today with this motion. They can encourage our vision, public health care system, or they can support a for-profit system where we pay more and receive less quality, which will worsen the crisis in our healthcare system.
I want to make it very clear with the interference, the foreign interference, serious allegations. We put forward, New Democrats put forward a motion in committee, which was passed, and that motion is to have a public inquiry. We believe this should be nonpartisan, it should be transparent and public, and we continue to push for that. That is our position, and that's why we push for that vote in Parliament, and we'll continue to push for in committee, and we'll continue to push for a public inquiry that is nonpartisan and, of course, transparent. Je veux encore
I want to repeat that it was us, the NDP, that proposed the motion in the committee for an inquiry, a public inquiry. We believe we should have an independent, nonpartisan, and transparent inquiry, and this is why we propose this motion. And we will continue to put pressure. We'll continue to pressure for public inquiry. Yes, concerning this public inquiry. Might it imperil your agreement with the Liberals if they decide not to go forward with this public inquiry? It's not a decision that we will make today. It's not a decision that we will make today, but it's clear that we want to see a public inquiry. A public inquiry is independent, nonpartisan, and after what we saw in the committee, it's clear that we need a nonpartisan group. It's a circle in the committee where the Conservatives and Liberals are scoring political points instead of finding true solutions for our democracy.
In English, would you withhold your, pull your support from the Liberals?
Yeah, as I've said before, that's not a decision I'm making today. What we do want is a public inquiry, because after seeing what we saw in committee, it is clear that the Liberals and Conservatives want to play a political game and score points because both parties are implicated in some of these serious allegations. And we think that it's not about scoring political points, it's about protecting our democracy. And that's why we put forward the motion for a public inquiry. We're happy to see we receive support on that. We now want to see the government move forward. We want to see Prime Minister Trudeau move forward on the public inquiry because that will provide independence, nonpartisan, and transparent way to deal with these very serious allegations.
Some say that in a public inquiry, some, like the CSIS director, can't really break their confidentiality agreements and secrets, state secrets. Is this... They won't raise the secret on those documents, so we will get information, public inquiry also, that could be potentially confidential. We accept that. We recognize that. We understand that. But the difference why we're underscoring the importance of a public inquiry is to have two things: nonpartisan and transparent. So some aspects, some items, because of national security, might not be made public, but generally speaking, the approach of a non-partisan approach after what we saw in committee, it's clear that this committee is not something that's working to find solutions and fix things. It's really a political game to score political points instead of finding solutions. And for me, something that's pretty important, important for democracy, I would prioritize solutions to protect our democracy and maintain the importance of a system where everyone can have faith in. And that's why I want a public inquiry, and we're going to pressure particularly on Prime Minister Trudeau.
While you're working to maybe convince the government to hold a, as you say, nonpartisan independent inquiry, there's still the work of the parliamentary committee, of course, PROC, and Conservatives on that committee have some very specific individuals they'd like to have testify, specifically Katie Telford and so on. And I think they're a little confused, the Conservatives are a little confused why they're not getting support from the Democrats on some of the relevant witnesses.
Well, we have supported having relevant witnesses testify, and we'll continue to do that. Let's be very clear, though, the Conservatives don't have the goal of getting to the truth. They really made it clear their goal is just to make this into a circus, to call everyone and anyone they can. And then when confronted with the option to expand it to include more witnesses that will actually get to the reality of political interference, particularly potentially Russia as well, we saw the Conservatives afraid of that because they're worried about expanding it to really get to the heart of the matter. And the difference between us and the Conservatives and the Liberals on this is we actually just want to see solutions. We want to see real transparency around what's going on. We want Canadians to know what's going on, and we want to provide a real path towards protecting our democracy instead of finding an attack point to target one prime minister. We want to target the entire electoral system to make sure it's being safeguarded, it's being protected, and we're not worried about gaining points on the Conservatives or the Liberals, both who've got some implication in this foreign interference. We actually just want to see an open, transparent, independent process that gives us the tools that we need to ensure that our democracy is protected.
Just one other thing about the Prime Minister, you may have heard last week, we've asked him about this inquiry. Among other things, he's noted that there's the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, right? Or there may be some other fora where parliamentarians are sworn to secrecy or something like that. About an hour ago, Mr. Poilievre said that that sort of fora would be, quote, a trap, a trick, if we had to swear MPs to get information and they couldn't talk about it. What do you think about the idea of, you know, how public things should be, or should parliamentarians be sworn to secrecy, be allowed to review some of this CISA stuff?
Right. I don't want to say, I'm loath to say the words I agree with the individual you've mentioned, but I will say, though, I don't think this should be in any way a private or a secret committee. This is something important that Canadians should have access to. Of course, there will be some information, given that it's national security, given that there'll be CSIS information. Some of it may be required to be kept confidential, but the process should be public, and that's why I do not support a committee like the one you referred to, the NCCOP, as an option. It's not something that will provide the transparency. And really, I said two principles for me. It's the nonpartisan independence, and secondly, it's the transparency. Public should be involved in the sense that they should know what's going on. And that, to me, those two are the prime principles why I would say public inquiry is the best way to go.
Bruce Rosenberg, the author of the 2021 protocol report, told CTV News that perhaps we need to start looking at the CSIS Act and potentially modernizing it. Is that something the NDP would support or push for, to close those gaps?
Anytime there's ways for us to protect our national security and improve legislation around national security that doesn't undermine privacy or human rights or the Constitution, we should look at ways of modernizing and improving.
And just to go back about, I know David, my friend David here, tried to get opinion on this idea of withholding support from the Liberals or not. But this vote on that PROC report could happen in 2 days, as early as 2 days. When do you think you might make a decision about that? And who knows, maybe the Prime Minister wants to declare a confidence vote. So very shortly, it might be decision time for you. Would that be fair to say about whether or not Liberals deserve New Democrat support, generally speaking?
Well, if there is a non-confidence vote, we'll make a determination when that happens. That's not in front of us right now. What is in front of us is the fact that we want to see a public inquiry. We believe that's the right way to go. Given what we've seen, again, you can look at, if anyone's seen any of the clips of what's going on in committee, it is not a process that seems committed to finding solutions to improve our democracy. It seems more so the Conservatives want to score points on the Liberals, and Liberals want to do the same to the Conservatives. We, New Democrats, are not into that. We think that something as important as our democracy should be treated seriously and should be treated nonpartisan, and that's why an independent public inquiry is the way to go to assess what's going on, the exact extent of it, and then look for recommendations for us to improve our democracy and protect it.
So, anything that is not an independent public inquiry would not satisfy you. I think that the work of the committee should continue and may continue, and we will support the motions that are put forward, that will advance the work of the committee, but I think it's insufficient, this committee work, because it's too partisan. And it's a question of interference, foreign interference in our democracy. It's important enough that a public inquiry is the real way to take seriously the allegations and to find solutions that will protect our electors. So is it a public inquiry and nothing else? The two things I want to see, if there's another way of getting these two, so independence and nonpartisan and transparent, and if there's another way of getting that, I'm open to listening to options. I don't know if there's another option, but I'm open if it satisfies these two aspects, transparency and nonpartisan independence. But in my opinion, a public inquiry is really the best way. But if there's another option that satisfies these two aspects, I'm open to analyze that.
Is there maybe a compromise short of an inquiry that you would accept? Like, there has been some suggestions that perhaps all of the political leaders could be brought in and given the same high-level, top-level briefing about what our national security agencies knew. You would have that information. Would that be something that would be a compromise you'd accept?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I said really there's two broad elements that I want to see happen. And the one is around nonpartisan independence. That's one. And the second is transparency so the public knows what's going on. If those two are satisfied in another forum, I'm open to that. We've said that the public inquiry is the best way to do it, but there might be another way. I don't know exactly what that is, but there might be another path that does satisfy those two. And I would look at that and make an assessment if it does achieve the independence and the nonpartisan, as well as having clear transparency for the public. That's something that we could look at as an option.
How do you, I guess, manage the fact that you're dealing with very top secret information, where there's information that even at committee, it seems that some of the spy agency folks weren't able to answer because it was a public forum. How do you manage that? How do you, like, at some point, don't you think you might have to make a compromise that because you're dealing with high-level, top-secret information that may be a public forum. I know you want transparency. I want that too as a journalist. Mm-hmm. But at some point, like, maybe that's something you might have to compromise on.
That happens all the time, though. I think it's a fair question. It happens all the time in inquiries where there are some elements of the inquiry where the information is confidential. And so then there's a portion that goes in camera or a portion that's put before. If there's a judge overseeing it, it goes before the judge and it doesn't get to the public. There are portions of inquiries where that happens. And that is a normal course of action given, we're a G7 nation, national security interests. We don't want, for example, countries to know about the details of how our spy agency is operating or the resources that we have. And so there's certain things that may be so important that we don't want the public, we don't want it in the public discourse because it could undermine the work of our agencies. That's understandable. And so having some mechanism where that is assessed in front of an independent person like a judge who can make that assessment, this would rise to the level of having some concerns. That's fair and that's understandable. But the general principle is, given the foreign interference and given the implications that a foreign government is trying to influence, in this case, we know so far, nomination meetings, that is very serious. And we want the public to know that we're taking steps to assess exactly what happened and how broad this is, and then take steps to recommend how can we prevent this from happening in the future. That's really the goal here. That should be the goal, and that's my goal. And that's why I'm pushing for a public inquiry, or in the alternative, if there are some ways to achieve the outcome of transparency, independence, and having nonpartisan forum, then we'll look at another option as well.
So should we move more quickly on developing a foreign interference registry then, given everything that you're saying?
That's something we should look at. That's probably why a public inquiry or having someone assess all the seriousness or all the evidence in front of us and then make recommendations around what we need to do to protect ourselves. Is it a registry? Are there other rules that should be put in place? What other protections can be put in place in terms of nomination meetings and nomination meeting processes? These are all the questions that are very legitimate questions that we need to have some evidence gathering and then some expert advice around how we fix them. And that's exactly why we think a public inquiry will help us get both of those things, assess the problem, and then provide us with concrete recommendations to fix and to provide support for future preventing this from happening.
Just on the private delivery of public health care, previously you said you're not ready to say whether or not this would be a reason to pull support. You ready to say that now?
Well, we are right now, in front of us is a vote, and the vote will really determine the way which way parliamentarians want to go. We've laid out our vision very clearly where we stand. We want public, universal health care, and we don't want a cent of our public dollars. We understand Canadians are hardworking people. They're hard-earned money, the public money that we are entrusted with. Not a cent of that should go to a private equity firm that invests in for-profit care. Not a cent of that should go to a venture capitalist that's invested in for-profit care. We want to see every dollar of hard-earned taxpayer money go towards the care of our loved ones. And we saw the alternative in long-term care, that we've got these very wealthy corporations making huge profits off the pain of their residents, and we see some of the worst outcomes in those. So we've got shareholders making big profits, and we've got residents in those centers, in those facilities that are receiving some horrible treatment. So we don't want that to happen. We want public dollars going towards public care, going towards care that puts people first, and that remains our position. And we'll see today where the Parliament stands on that, and then we'll continue to push our vision, which is for the universal health care for every Canadian. No one should worry about how much money they have in their pocket and whether they can afford to get care or not. They can get the best care possible, and we want to see that that's the vision for Parliament. And so we'll put that to a question today. The vote will happen today. We'll see where people stand.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Merci. Thank you.
I can check online to see
Sure.
if there's a question.
Sure.
If you have a question and you're online, please use the raise hand function to notify us of your question. Si vous avez une question, vous êtes en ligne, utilisez la fonction lever la main pour nous aviser de votre question.
While we're waiting, do you want to maybe sit on the Agriculture Committee on Wednesday to have a question for Galen Weston?
Oh, I'll be there. Okay. Yes, tune in. I'll be there. Sure. Thanks so much. Appreciate it all. Thank you.
All right, so we're just listening there to NDP leader Jagmeet Singh talking about a number of things, but a lot of questions again directed to that one big question that's being asked by the Prime Minister around election interference and a full inquiry on this, a public inquiry. Calls we heard from the Conservatives, we're hearing from the NDP. Let's just take a listen in here again.
That's admitting that profit-driven inflation is a legitimate concern, and that the increasing of interest rates has not impacted the price of groceries. And it shows that really this is not an interest rate susceptible issue. This is corporate greed that's driving up the cost of living. We've got economists in Europe that are also acknowledging that this is happening across the world, where the greed of corporations is they're using the cover of inflation to increase profits. We're seeing more and more or mounting support for this position. And so we're going to hear from the CEOs. We're going to call them to the committee. They're coming on Wednesday. And we'll ask them questions. Why is it that you are making massive profits while Canadians are struggling to buy their groceries? Why is it that week after week grocery prices continue to rise, their profits continue to rise, and Canadians are struggling? And we'll put those questions to the CEOs, and we've received lots of feedback from Canadians around the questions we should ask, and I'll be asking those questions in committee on Wednesday. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so that press conference just ending there, and you heard NDP leader Jagmeet Singh just commenting there now on the committee that's going to be taking place starting today, but over the course of the week. Top executives of the country's major grocery chains, they are expected to be grilled by MPs. The NDP leader there, Jagmeet Singh, saying he will be there on Wednesday at committee to ask those major grocery chain some of those questions with regards to costs of food prices, etc. I want to bring in our senior political correspondent for CTV News Channel, Mike Couture, onto this. Like we've seen, Mike, with every press conference, there's been a lot really to unpack here. We talked about There's
been a lot, and Angie, and it's not to say one over the other, but you notice how he kind of stood up there and took as many questions as there were?
Yes.
Just going to put that out there.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Just, maybe compare and contrast to what we saw an hour ago. Anyways, continue on. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so let's sort of dive into all the things that he talked about here. One of the main points that you and I have been talking about all morning and now into the afternoon is the issue of that public inquiry, the election interference. I want you to sort of give me your impressions here, because a lot of bit of repetition, I'm going to say, from Jagmeet Singh in terms of what he's looking for, the nonpartisanship, independent inquiry, and transparency. And he kind of stayed on that narrative with really not providing the alternative which reporters were asking for.
Yeah, and that continues to be the question, but what if not that, especially when you consider David Vigneault, the head of CSIS, had said last week that, look, if you have a public inquiry, then, you know, there is certain information that continues to be classified that you can't air out in the public. And this is as a result of different agreements with Five Eyes nations that we continue to share intelligence with. And you can't just put everything out on the table because it would compromise our own national security and the way that we gather intelligence. I thought it was interesting, though, because even though he kept answering the same thing, it has to be a public inquiry, it has to be nonpartisan to make sure that we're removing all of these partisan games that we're seeing at committee. He did, right near the end there, say if there is some alternative way of achieving transparency and removing partisanship, I'm open to it.
Right.
So a little bit of a crack of daylight there for Jagmeet Singh to walk through a possible other door that is not a full public inquiry. Now, maybe I'm just sort of looking for that type of door, because in a sense, you have to wonder, if it's not a public inquiry, and what about that issue of national security and not being able to say certain things?
Right.
Singh mentioned in that, well, you can have a public inquiry where you have a judge who's leading it and say, let's take things in camera, let's sort of, you know that this is going to be something that can't fully be public. Well, then if it's not fully public, then is it truly transparent? And I think that is maybe one of the issues that Jagmeet Singh is dealing with right now in terms of calling for transparency, but at the same time understanding that there's a line there, that you can't have full transparency when it comes to top secret intelligence.
Yeah.
The public just seemingly, just can't really know this type of thing, because that will very easily go to people who are trying to sow doubt about our electoral system,
Indeed.
like different other foreign actors, the Chinese, the Russians, whoever, and you can't have that public.
Indeed. And so give me a sense then of where you think the narrative is going to go in the House today.
I think it'll continue to go in that way, and the Prime Minister will likely stand and make his argument that, the head of CSIS has, he himself said, we can't have something that is fully transparent in public. But then at the same time, I think what will be thrown back at him was part of the interview done on CTV's Question Period with Vassy Kapelos and Maurice Rosenberg, who was the author of that report on the 2021 election, saying you can't take it off the table. So let's replay that to refresh people's memories. We do not have that clip. Okay. I'm sorry. So, but he did basically say that that is something that is in the realm of possibilities. We can't completely take that off the table. Further giving a little bit of sort of, clout to the opposition parties that continue to call for this. So it'll be interesting to see where the Prime Minister sits and how he's able to sort of reconcile that today. We are going to be following it very closely, as I know you will for us as well, Mike, our senior political correspondent, excuse me, for CTV News Channel, Mike Lucator. Thanks, all right, we're going to take a quick break here on CTV News Channel. Live look there of Parliament Hill. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And some nasty weather rolling in across the country today.
Extreme weather can hit quickly. Know the risks in your area and learn what actions you can take. Are you ready? Visit getprepared.ca.
Swiss Chalet is home to Canada's favorite rotisserie chicken. Dine in now, and for only $17.99, enjoy our famous quarter chicken paired with shrimp sautéed in garlic butter. Or for $18.99, try our fish and chips served with our fresh cut fries. Hurry into Swiss Chalet.
We don't believe in outsiders. The world is facing a global mental health crisis. Help us build a future where no one is left behind.
Here, anything is possible, as long as you can imagine it. And that's what makes Orlando unbelievably real.
Not all water flossers are created equal. Waterpik is the original trusted leader and the #1 water flosser brand in the world. Waterpik is proven to remove up to 99.9% of plaque from treated areas. Choose Waterpik for an easy and effective way to floss.
Meow Mix Tasty Layers. A swirl of 2 pate flavors stuffed with real chicken or fish. Meow Mix Tasty Layers. Still the only one cats ask for by name.
Are aches and pains in your legs and feet impacting your life? Find relief with Revitive Medic.
Drug-free Revitive is clinically proven to actively improve leg circulation.